Good afternoon. Welcome to our in-person uh, legal aid fair presentation. Welcome to our in-person audience members and our participants on YouTube. I am Christina Exell, attorney at law and tutor of the Norman Manley Law School Legal Aid Clinic, and I am your moderator for this afternoon's session. The previous sessions dealt with issues of sustainability and how we can strengthen and rebuild our communities, and that theme continues today, where this session we will be focusing on how we can strengthen our communities when particular forces threaten our communities. And I will first ask Ms. Alicia Jones to introduce our presenter.
Distinguished guests, faculty, students, members of the legal fraternity, members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and all invited guests and participants, good afternoon. It is with profound respect and a deep sense of privilege to be given the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker this afternoon, a leader whose life and career stand as a testament to discipline, intellect, service, and steadfast commitment to national development. Our guest speaker is a servant leader, a strategist, a scholar, and a policy contributor. His professional journey exemplifies the powerful merge of visionary leadership and operational excellence, making him far more than just a senior law enforcement professional. Currently holding the position of Superintendent of Police and Director of the Firearm and Narcotics Investigation Division, he brings over 19 years of distinguished service in the Jamaica Constabulary Force. His academic accomplishments reflect the same depth and intentionality that defined his professional life. He possesses an MBA with a concentration in strategic and security management, a Bachelor of Laws degree, and an associate degree in criminal justice, along with professional certification in auditing and project management. His career is marked by significant contribution, including lecturing and representing Jamaica at numerous international forums. He is a former chairman of the Jamaica Police Federation and a recipient of the JCF Law Scholarship and a LASCO Top Cup finalist. As we convene today to examine the profound impact of illegal firearms and narcotics and Jamaica's trajectory towards sustainable development, we are privileged to be guided in this conversation by a vice most pertinent, one who addresses these issues not merely from a theoretical perspective, but from the reality of daily operational experience. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming our guest speaker, Superintendent of Police, Mr. Patrick Cairo.
I wish my children were here to hear that introduction. You know, when I tell them, they don't believe. But I'm sure I'll go back to the YouTube as proof. But thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good evening, tutor, organizers, faculty members, attorney in training. And of course to my own colleagues from the JCF. I mean, coming here, I did not know if I should feel nervous or, but when I came into the room and saw some familiar faces, I eliminated the thought that I needed to be nervous. I'm seeing some good friends of mine in the room, and Garfield, Alicia. These are people I know for many, many years. So no need to be nervous. So now let me get into the substantive matter of my presentation. But let me acknowledge colleagues who are sharing in this evening's presentation with me. I have Unit Director, Narcotics Investigation at FNID, Mr. Carlton Menzie, here with us. And I have Ms. Damali Dobson, Detective Constable, who is the firearm investigator. And my executive assistant, Ms. Visse, who is here this evening. I have 3 colleagues outside who are part of my security detail. Not that I'm intimidated by the fact that I'm coming here, but of course, they ensure that I got here safely and quickly. But this evening presentation, I hope that it will not be dominated by the theory, but I'm also looking forward to engaging you on the subject matter, particularly the reason why I brought with me practitioners. As the director of FNID, I provide really strategic direction and take the credit for most of the work. But the people who do the work are sitting in front of me, and of course, they will share first-hand experience if your questions solicit those experiences from them. But to get into the substance of the presentation really is to, so my task was to speak to you on the impact of illegal firearms and narcotics on the sustainable social development of Jamaica. Of course, FNID occupies pride of place as the repository of firearms and narcotics investigation in Jamaica. The statistics will justify that statement. Of course, we are the sole entity in Jamaica that has primacy over firearms and narcotics investigations. Not that other police formations don't do what we do, because of course, police officers generally have the narcotics and firearm investigation as a part of their purview. And of course, they are duty bound to carry out these investigations if it comes under their observation or knowledge and so forth. But we regard ourselves as specialists in the area. The narcotics component of our entity was established in 1974. And we have been doing narcotics investigation since that time. Of course, Dr. Kevin Blake, when he came in as commissioner in 2024, he formed the view that firearms and narcotics walk hand in hand. And therefore, he gave the firearm mandate to the entity, and therefore, the name has changed to Firearms and Narcotics Investigation Division. Whilst the firearm component is new, the officers within the unit leverage the same investigative skills to leverage firearm investigation. And of course, with a new act that came in force in 2022, the unit has the broad mandate to interdict firearms and narcotics, and we have statistics to show how well the entity is doing in that regard. Throughout my presentation, I will look at sustainable development. I'll breeze through quickly on that. We'll look at the impact of our intervention on sustainable development in Jamaica. We'll look at the legal framework. We'll look at FNID mandate. We'll look at combating organized crime. And of course, we will look at the contentious geopolitical issues that confronts us when we treat with matters of this nature, and of course our references are contained therein. Of course, in terms of sustainable development goal, it is widely known that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them, are, some people say they are aspirational, and some people look at them as a broad pathway to what we need to achieve in terms of our own aspirations as a people and as a country and as a United Nation. Even though goal number 16 affects us immediately in terms of peace, justice, and strong institution. Just this evening, I was having a discussion with my colleagues about how broadly our impact is as it relates to across the 17 sustainable development goals. And you can discern in your own mind how narcotics and firearms impact the individual and collective sustainable development goal. I mean, non-poverty, for example, I mean, you can look at a situation where narcotics and firearms, the prevalence of firearms impedes the desire for us as a people to eliminate poverty. And of course, we will integrate them as we go along. Localizing the arguments on sustainable development goals to, I mean, Jamaica, we look at the, these 5 areas: people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and of course, the planet, and how sustainable development impact and associate itself, I mean, with these areas. Development, in our view, depends on safety, trust in institution, and predictable enforcement of rights. High violence divert public resources away from education, health, and community infrastructure. Legal systems shape outcomes through deterrence, accountability, proportionality, and legitimacy. I'm just very impressed at how well my eyes work. Stakeholder and public support to law enforcement will restore dignity and peace. And of course, we spoke about how important Goal 16 is to guide in our own approach in terms of operationally, and the overarching strategic approach to our own investigation. And of course, I mean, you cannot have a discussion on sustainable development without looking at our own country's Vision 2030. I mean, Vision 2030 is 4 years away. I mean, the argument is whether we'll be able to achieve this in 4 years or not. I mean, as a Jamaica Constabulary Force, I firmly believe that we are doing our part to ensure that we at least get close to it, to making Jamaica the place of choice to live, raise family, and do business. Of course, we can have a long debate on whether we'll achieve it in 4 years or not. But I think we have come a far way, and we are closer to it now than we were when the goals were developed. I mean, but just to look at the goals broadly, Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their full potential. Jamaican society is secure, cohesive, and just, are we? Jamaica's economy is prosperous. Are we? Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. So, when we look at the goal broken down in, achievable bits and pieces, we talk about, areas of social protection, health and wellness, human capital development. We talk about rule of law, and this I know you're most concerned with, and timely justice outcomes. That is another one. I'm sure Mr. Menzi can tell you about some cases that we have had before the courts for years. And that is, I mean, today one of my member of my security detail went to court in a matter where we arrested some persons a few years ago, and the matter is still at the mention stage. So we're talking about timely. Is that timely justice? Is there reasonable assurances within our justice system that somebody can enter the justice system, whether having entered as a suspect or a witness, and see a justiciable end within reasonable time? Inclusion, sustainable economic growth, and job creation. In terms of localizing the idea of sustainable development to law enforcement, we look at the rule of law as a national strategic impact, and timely justice. We, reverberate those earlier. But the national outcome is security and safety, effective governance, and particularly around strategic sustainable development goal 16. The impact, when we look, this was the big story for last year, 2025, where the JCF achieved, and I should say the Jamaican people achieved, a murder reduction of 42%. And of course, 33% reduction. I mean, I'll take the applause. Shooting 30%. And you can see the downward trajectory looking at a 5-year comparison, 2021 to 2025. And it's a big deal for us to have achieved sub 1,000 murder figures. And one of the things with success is that it allows us to develop ambitions. And therefore, the commissioner has said to us that for this year, we are looking at sub 600, right? And we firmly believe that it is achievable. And our efforts are indicative of that. For those persons who have interacted with us and engaged with us, especially through our expos, the technology that we are bringing to bear and we are leveraging in crime fighting. I'm sure that you are seeing a demonstrable difference. I mean, with policing and how policing is engaged, and when you encounter police officers, the adverse interactions are oftentimes, in recent times, the minority of the interaction. I hope I can get an agreement on that. We do not shy away from the fact that oftentimes the interaction with police and citizens is sometimes not ideal. But I mean, I often like to say that before joining the force, I taught for some time. I was in the classroom, not a long time. But I find that teachers oftentimes have very good interaction from beginning to end. And now when I perhaps go to my parish of birth, Manchester, and see some students I taught about over 20 years ago, the excitement with which they greet suggests that they fondly remember the engagement with their teacher at that stage. As police officers, we meet our customers on their worst days. Right? We either meet them when they are in distress and are pursuing help, or we meet them when we are pursuing them as suspects. Right? So there's not a good experience in terms of, the customer engagement. But I oftentimes say to officers that in every situation, whether it is traumatic, whether we are engaging suspects and so on, we are to ensure that the engagement ends with us, with the customer feeling satisfied. I've had the pleasure of arresting, not me, my staff, effecting an arrest within a widely publicized operation that we had on Halfway Tree Road recently. And we had the suspects, doing secondary operation in St. Elizabeth, bringing them to Kingston, all over the place. And we had them at our headquarters for some time, made sure that they had food and, engaged them. And on the last day when we were about to take them back to custody so that they could be formally charged, the main suspect said to me, sir, can I say something to you? And I said, go ahead. And he said, this is the best experience I've had with police officers. And he was disturbed at the fact that he was being handed over to a different set of police. He was pleased with the experience. And I was saying to my colleagues, I wish I had a customer feedback form that we could give him to outline the exceptional service that we showed to him, even though I think he's still in custody. And he was facing certain charge. And of course, he most certainly will be convicted. After all, FNID has a conviction rate of 99%. Yes. So I know conviction is a matter for the court, but it's a credit to us that that 99% of the time we put matters before the court, we secure a conviction, right? No other entity within the JCF can boast that. And it is because of the proficiency and efficiency of the detectives that we have there. In terms of firearm and drug interdiction, last year, as I said before, was a record year in terms of firearm seizure, in terms of all our indicators, really. In terms of firearm seizure, when you look at a 5-year comparison, you see the firearms that we have seized. Last year was unprecedented. The most firearms that the Jamaica constabularies have seized since we started to record statistics on our work. And that's 1,201 firearms. In one instance, we seized 239 firearms in one instant. And that FNID is responsible for 44%. No, for 48% of the total seizure of firearms. So 1,201 is the JCF overall effort, and just under 50% was seized by FNID alone. And that's an increase of 44% over in comparison to the 2025 figure. So far since the start of the year, we seized 129 firearms. And we are in the 4th day of the 3rd month. And that's 129 firearms. And FNID is responsible for 26% of that, right? So we are playing our part in that regard. I mean, Ms. Dobson has a case with firearm trafficking. She should have traveled to the States this month to give evidence in a case where a Jamaican transship or ship 30 firearms, right? 30 firearms to Jamaica. And we investigated. She's the lead investigator in that case. Her case was so strong that the suspect in that case had no choice but to plead guilty. So we had to abort our plans to travel abroad to give evidence in that matter. But because he was prosecuted in the overseas jurisdiction, but she stands ready to support the prosecution of that same person once he's released from custody in the US. And the case is pursued here. Right, so we're looking forward to his return, so that we can test the strength of our case in that regard. So it is quite evident to you that we love what we do, right? So in terms of narcotics interdiction, last year we seized 34,000 kilograms. That is over 70,000 pounds of ganja. Right? And I know that in the very near future, I'll be getting calls from some of you about ganja seizure and the sacramental rights of your client to smoke marijuana. One lawyer took me to task in calling me to say that once his client has been acquitted, the drug should be returned. So I said to him, if your client was before the court on a firearm-related matter and he's acquitted, should the firearm be returned? He said, once there is no issues surrounding the seat. And I said, okay, this can't continue this discussion. But I mean, that's a matter for a legal debate. But of course, we are guided by the legislation in this regard. So we continue to seize ganja, and we'll tell you why. Jamaica, in respect to drugs, when I go to international conferences and hear the challenges around drugs and the discussion around drugs, I was in Belgium about 4 weeks ago having a discussion around drugs, and different countries have different issues on the matter. One country stood up and advocated for rooms where their citizens can administer cocaine in a safe way, because the country has recognized that they do not have the ability to stop people from taking the substance, so they are now advocating for it to be used in a controlled manner under supervision of a medical practitioner. You know, when it was my time to speak, they said, Jamaica, what's your argument on this? And I said, I mean, The beauty about Jamaica is that we do not have a drug consumption problem, but we have a drug trafficking problem. It's a business for us. One of the challenges that is emerging is that we are seeing, and this was made popular by some artists, I don't want to call the names, Molly and other synthetic drugs. My concern, or our concern at FNID is that the pervasiveness of synthetic drugs or party drugs, whether it is date rape, Molly, ecstasy, or those drugs, once you introduce them to our young people particularly, we believe that sustained usage of synthetic drugs may want our young people to develop the appetite for stronger drugs. And then we will have a drug problem, a drug consumption problem. And you can appreciate that a drug consumption problem will have challenges for our health sector. It will overwhelm our already fragile health facilities. You will have people who it will affect productivity, because you'll have people who are mostly high and don't want to engage in work. And of course, you'll have people who work within industries that you cannot have drug users being involved in and so on. And therefore, you may have a situation where we're importing labor in an already fragile employment sector. So you can see the challenges of drugs on the sustainable development of our country. And of course, we look at the value of it. This is a conversation that is not oftentimes engaged with, or the average Jamaican oftentimes do not engage with this particular subject matter. We have a situation where, so for example, last year, this is 2005 cost analysis, the FNID sees over $1 billion worth of drugs, right? Let me start with drugs first. The cocaine, for example, which we are seeing cocaine as emerging as a very pervasive drugs. We have been seizing far less than it is being trafficked through Jamaica. In the month of February, our overseas international partners have seized over 6 tons of cocaine that transshipped through Jamaica, right? Obviously, what we seized last year is pale in comparison to 6 tons. But what it is saying is that something is happening now that is causing Jamaica to be seeing so many drugs coming through the country. And let me tell you, let me give you a little understanding of the drug environment. Cocaine in Jamaica is sold for 600,000 Jamaican dollars per key. And a kilogram is just about 2 pounds. 2 pounds, a brick, right? And oftentimes cocaine is sold in keys. So you'll find several bricks of cocaine and so on, and it's sold in kilogram parcels. In Jamaica, 600,000. So what it means is that 1,377 kilograms that we seized last year, valued at 826 million Jamaican dollars, right? The same 1 kilogram of cocaine, if it is shipped to the United States of America, it is valued around 3,000 to 4,000 US dollars for the same 1 key. We are finding that the United States is not the destination of choice for cocaine. No, the destination of choice is Europe. If you send that same kilogram to the UK, it is $50 per gram for cocaine. 1,000 gram makes 1 kilogram, right? And so if it's $50 per gram, so if it's $50 per gram, right? $50 per gram, $50 times 1,000, that will give you, $50,000. That's 50,000 pounds for the same kilogram that is being sold in Jamaica for 600,000 Jamaican dollars. 5,000 euros is a 50,000 euros per kilo is a significant amount. But we find that the further north that the drug goes, the more value it attracts. For example, in Australia, 1 kilogram of cocaine is 100,000 Australian dollars. 100,000 Australian dollars is equivalent to 10 million Jamaican dollars. So you're seeing the profit margin. So, and that is why, the point I'm making is that these drug traffickers are risking life and limb, right, to get the drugs in. And you may wonder, why is it that so many drugs is passing through a port that seems from the outside impermeable? Right, you see the containers going up in the air, all of those, and significant amount of drugs pass through our ports, and the people on the wharfs are well paid. I mean, a lot of people want to leave law to go work at ports, leave police force to go work at ports, because the job within itself is already an attractive job. But can you imagine, paying millions of dollars for insider collusion to get your drugs out into Europe, because the profit margin is so significant. So one of the challenge that we have is insider collusion. Over the last few days, we see $55 million worth of cocaine on the ports in Jamaica, right? So we're talking about big business. Ganja, we can't say that Jamaicans are not heavy consumers of ganja. Jamaica is the largest cultivating country in the Caribbean in respect to ganja. Ganja is on the lower scale. Depending on the strain, it is sold for about $3,000 per pound, right? So, we at FNID seized last night, or was it night before last, we seized almost 2,500 kilograms of ganja on a boat in Alligator Pond. And this is, as I said before, these are routine for us. Almost every other day, we seize 2,000, 3,000 pounds of ganja. And of course, firearms is also a lucrative business. Handguns are being sold on average of 400,000, depending on the kind. And of course, rifles are being sold for $1 million. That's street value. When these guys bring in the rifles, that's what they sell it for among gangs and so on. So you find where does a regular gunman, get a rifle, get $1 million to buy, because drugs and gun hand in hand. And they rent these guns, or shoes as they call them. Yes, they rent them. Yeah, man, they rent the shoes, right? So they rent them, Masha works, carry it back, and that kind of thing. Yes, it's heavily commercialized. So our job is to disrupt that kind of activity. So, it's a technical. So, well, I hope it's not all the narcotics going through the computer. Right? Similar. So when I was in primary school, we used to talk about the barter system and so on. And even now, barter is still being used as currency, right? We do it in our everyday life. Say, boy, help me with this, I'm going to give you one shoes, or help me with this, I'm going to give you some food, and that kind of thing, barter. The same thing in the criminal underworld. So drugs, and when I hear we talk about the drugs for gun trade between Jamaica and Haiti, the trade is, and that's one of the reasons why we seize the drugs, because the drugs is not mere drug trafficking, but it also influences firearm trafficking. Because what is on the screen now is what is the currency. Drugs being used as currency for firearms. So 50 pounds of ganja get you one handgun, right? So when our fishermen, are supposedly fishermen, pack up their boats, and I have pictures from the seizure the other night, with one boat just stuck with bags of ganja. And a lawyer will tell us that, boys, his client was going out to the key for sacramental purposes and so on. But we know that they are going to carry out an exchange, because the ganja is currency for gun. And there was a time when they were using meat as currency for gun as well, because of the situation in Haiti and so on. Anything is used in exchange for gun because of the prevalence of guns. There was a time when our forensic services branch was doing ballistics and weapons that were branded 80 national police force, right? And so on and so forth. So this is the gamut of the challenge. So one pistol in exchange for 50 pounds of ganja, right? And $3,000 per pound, which is an average. As I said before, depending on the kind of ganja you have, skunk, or whatever it is. You have ganja can be sold up to about $20,000 per pound. You know, you have some variation of ganja that can go up to about $100,000 per pound, right? It depends on the strain. So at the very minimum of $3,000 per pound, we're looking at $50. 50 pounds is exchanged for a rifle. The value of that is 150,000 Jamaican dollars, and that same gun comes inland and is being sold for $300,000 to $400,000. Look at the profit margin, over 100,000 profit, right? A few weeks ago, Menzi, we had a case in Ochirias where we sees FNID officers, FNID Special Response Unit interdicted a vehicle, stop a vehicle, and seize 3 kilograms of cocaine from the vehicle, right? 2 persons were arrested, and we placed them in custody, placed them before the court. One of them got bail. And we did an operation in Montego Bay 79 days later, and the same gentleman was arrested again. 4 kilograms of cocaine this time, right? So it's the profit. While the enforcement is, we may want the enforcement to act as sufficient deterrent to the activity. The profit margin is saying to them that, as long as me get bail, me good, right? Gone back to business, and that's what we are seeing. And in terms of rifle, 100 pound of ganja in exchange for a rifle. And you can see the profit margin on that. That's 300,000 in exchange rate. And then the profit margin on that is over $700,000 worth of profit in terms of rifle. So I'm telling you why the trade is so pervasive and so on. When we look at drugs, we look at cash, drugs in exchange for cash, drugs in kind, so in terms of drugs for guns and that kind of thing. We are seeing cases where people are in the drug business and are being promised Porsche, Range Rover, that kind of thing. These are exchange. These are currencies that are being exchanged for drugs and facilitation of drugs. And they're using unsuspecting or supposedly innocent Jamaican people to assist them in these endeavors. More firearms in terms of availability of firearm, more firepower. I believe that the only reason why we're able to seize 1,201 firearms is because firearm is prevalent, right? If somebody can send 239 firearms in one shipment, it means that they have secured reasonable assurances that that shipment would have made it through. The discounted FNID, obviously, but they must have had insider collusion to say that, yeah man, send your shipment, we are going to make it go through, right? And if we are able to seize 1,201, can you imagine how much we have not seized, how much we miss? So these are real challenges. When we talk about social erosion, I spoke about that earlier, the stresses on our services. When you look at what was happening with the robbery of a particular money carrier transportation service, right? Can you look at the implication of that and what the company had to do to change their modus operandi to ensure that the service was able to continue uninterrupted and so on. When we look at public safety, we talk about homicide, shooting, fear. Sometimes the fear of crime is greater than crime itself. Sometimes people say to you, boy, Jamaica's so terrible. You say to them, have you ever had an interaction with a gunman? Have you ever seen somebody shot? No. Have you ever been robbed? No. Have you ever seen a boy? No. But Jamaica too terrible, right? The fear of crime. Because this is what is the watch at 7 o'clock in the night. On the news, this is what the social media influencers, whether it is, P or what's his name? Sir something another, right? Right? What they tell you, and then you are in a state of fear, even though you have never experienced crime itself. Some of us have been a police officer for 20 odd years and has never been shot at, never seen a shootout, and we are on the front line of the fight. So the fear of crime is very pervasive. And sometimes we have to address not only crime, but the fear of crime as well. And we could go into debate about media management and information management. When you watch news, international news, you don't hear about how much people kill in their street every day, right? You hear about how great their country is and that kind of thing, and that so the narrative help with that as well. We're not saying that the media should curtail the reporting, but we are saying that the balance, if we want to address fear of crime, we have to not exacerbate it or make it more pervasive than it actually is. Health in terms of trauma, education, absenteeism, school disruption, reduced attainment in high crime violence area, economic, and of course governance, the risk of corruption, weakened trust and justice institution. Oftentimes when I look at social media commentary, especially after we have made an arrest and send a release, some people get bail and some people are in custody, and you hear the commentary, because a big man why him get bail, make a one look a man, that kind of thing. So that influences justice and trust and what the trust people have. And somebody is saying it is true. But can you imagine, that you go out there and as a big shot lawyer, KC, and your client call you once if need arrest them, and you show up at the station and go to court and petition the court to release your client with arguments to suggest that your client has health issues. Your client is not a flight risk. Your client is a decent and upstanding member of the community, and the court obliges you and give your client bail. But the man from down at Alligator Pond were found with more drugs than you, don't have a KC to call, right? And may say, all right, I can just rub out my time in a jail, because the prospects of bail is not high because I don't have the money to retain the best of counsels. So that variable has to be a part of the conversation, right? So we have to look at that as well. So we do not give bail or treat case based on who people are, based on color, creed. I have been known to perpetuate a narrative that says that I don't care who you are. When my officers arrest you, we don't ask you what is your profession, where you work, are you a colleague of ours? In fact, our favorite people to arrest are our own colleagues, because we believe that these people should be held to a much higher standard, right? So we take great pride in ensuring that people who seek to compromise our reputation and put us at reputational risk are treated with the FNID standard. Jamaica is both a transit and a transshipment hub for drugs. We spoke about that. Jamaica remains the largest Caribbean producer and exporter of ganja. Jamaica is vulnerable to exploitation by transnational organizations and so on, and that is really based on positioning. Where we are positioned between North and South America, it makes Jamaica an attractive destination for drug trafficking, and of course our porous borders contribute to it. I believe that notwithstanding the fact that we have a lot of vessels on the seas or we have a lot of police on land, there's no way we can secure the entirety of Jamaica with the law enforcement resources that we have. Looking at legal framework, we talk about harsher penalty, we talk about the Firearm Prohibition Restricted Regulations and Regulation 2022 Act, which has become the subject of much debate, especially when we talk about the definition for prohibited weapon. And I listened to narrative or verbiage about police arresting people with water gun, and what if my child is outside playing with his water gun and police arrest him. As law students, as lawyers in the room, you know what the law says about the ordinary man, what the law interprets to be the ordinary man. Would you consider a policeman the ordinary man? I use in my LLB that you see on the screen. Uh, so, police are not, police are trained for a reason. Police, I don't see any of my officers arresting a 5-year-old with a water gun and say, this is a prohibited weapon, we're going to take it before the court, and so on. That's not how it works. I believe that it's a stretch. It's a long time we have been advocating for greater punitive sanction. We believe that our law should act as sufficient deterrent. We believe that mandatory minimum is necessary. A man with a firearm, the firearm, a 9mm firearm can carry about 17 rounds, 19 rounds in some instances. That can kill 19 people. Why not mandatory minimum of 15 years once somebody is guilty of the offense, right? 15 is a small number still, but prohibition, right? That's right. 15 per round, right? One per round. That sounds good. Can't wait for you to get on the bench. Provisions for possession component parts. So the new act not only secure harsher punishment, but it also regulated areas that were not previously regulated under the law, such as component parts. So a person found with a part of a firearm can now be held liable and charged for having component parts of a prohibited weapons, and that is because what happens sometimes is that you'll find 4 people traveling in a car, and you'll find that they oftentimes give the woman in the vehicle a part of the firearm. So say for example they hang the grip, they'll give to somebody else, they'll give the slide to somebody else, and they will give the barrel to somebody else in the vehicle. So if you stop the vehicle and arrest somebody and search them and find only a part of it, you can't say, okay, well, it's not a complete firearm. It is now considered an offense, and you can be prosecuted for that. Even a round in the pocket, and so on. Extended list of firearm-related offenses, that's good. And then, of course, stronger focus on modern threats, such as ghost gun. Ghost gun, oftentimes, Dobson can tell you that oftentimes we have big seizures. We find a lot of ghost guns, and they are called ghost guns because they are untraceable. They do not have a ballistic footprint. They are produced with 3D printers. So you can buy a 3D printer and make your own gun, print your own gun, and use it to kill people. So the provision, this act contemplates the use of 3D guns, ghost gun, imitation firearms, and so on. And some people talk about imitation firearm, but oftentimes when a firearm is used in the commission of an offense, probably robbery, rape, somebody approach you unknowingly from behind in the cover of dark, put something in your side and said firearm, or said don't move. What you feel is a firearm. You feel threatened. You feel like your life is in danger if you do not comply with what you're asked to comply with in the moment, and therefore it is being used as an imitation firearm. You thinking that it's a firearm, and the person who's using it intended for you to think that it was firearm, and you comply based on the fact that you thought if you did not comply, you would have been killed with what you believe is a firearm. Don't you believe that these persons should face similar punitive sanctions, similar to if they had a firearm? I'm coming down to the end of the presentation. But we talk about some of the possession of prohibited weapons that is found in Section 5 of the Act that guarantees a mandatory minimum of 15 years and goes up to 25 years. Stockpiling, previously that wasn't a charge. 3 or more firearms or 50 rounds together creates the offense of stockpiling prohibited weapons at 15 to 25 years. Again, trafficking in prohibited weapons at Section 7 of the Act guarantees, well, I shouldn't say guarantee, but attracts a life sentence or minimum of 20 years before being eligible for parole. And of course, we talk about Section 10 that speaks to dealing in prohibited weapon trafficking is dealt with at Section 33, and so on and so forth. If we should look at dangerous drugs, Section 7 speak about ganja, cultivating, you see the sanctions there. My personal view is that the sanctions for marijuana, for drug-related offenses are just too low. Oftentimes, whether it is cocaine, ganja, these persons are released 500,000 or 2 years, or suspended sentence in some cases. These people who deal in drugs can pay $500,000. So once they are released, pay the $500,000, and then tomorrow morning we arrest them again. You know, I remember we went on an operation in St. Mary where we seized about 4,000 pounds of ganja, arrested about 2 Asians. Where's Richie? That's Richie case. 2 Asian and some other. And when we brought them to the office, you know, one of the guys was saying, "Enough time to come here." You know, and our office is not a regular police station that you walk in and make a report. You come there because a drug or gun, right? And he said, "I've been here enough time," you know. And I mean, once so, that case was about last year, July. I mean, he has not been visiting us much these days because he has been in custody since July, right? But, you know, this is not acting as sufficient deterrent because once they are charged, they are on bail, we catch them again. So we are very familiar with our customers. They are repeat customers in a number of cases. So oftentimes we find drugs, we know exactly who to go for. You know, say, "Come on, come back today," right? Because, you know, with these guys, this is not acting as deterrent. So we have to do something, I mean, in terms of the legislation and so on. Section 8 that speaks to other dangerous drugs, 22, and so these are pertinent areas of law. I spoke about the FNID mandates as it relates to interdicting, supply chain, weapons at our ports, treating with ballistic, link investigation, tracing firearm. Jamaica do not produce firearm. And therefore, our firearms come from mostly up north, especially through our airports, our seaports. That's where the firearm comes in. Engage stakeholders like we're doing now to enhance what we do, enhance our investigation. Of course, I mean, I know for a fact that within the coming months and years, we will engage with some of you as stakeholders, you know, whether you are engaging us from a perspective of an innocent party or a supposedly guilty party subject to court ruling. But of course, we like to engage counsel. And of course, some of you will work for us in terms of helping us to prosecute and to advance a credible case before the court and so on. And some of you will work as prosecutors to help us to tighten our cases to ensure that we sustain and maintain our 95% conviction rate, right? So we're looking forward to that kind of engagement, whether defense or prosecution, whichever side. Seizure creates prosecution opportunities, but also strict evidential demand, case management, witness protection, victim management, accountability, and oversight. Right? When we look at, what we have been doing in terms of our own capacity to carry out our mandate, enhancing capacity building. Our officers are well trained. We invest a whole lot in them. Richards was in El Salvador, I think, 2 weeks ago. Menzi was in Netherlands 3 weeks ago. So they are well trained, well traveled, and they bring a lot of experience. And so we are about building capacity to ensure that we create the finest minds. And our attrition rate at FNID is very, 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 very low. People don't leave, right? Unless it's retirement. And when they retire, they ask if they could stay a little longer, right? Modernization of and operational support, through the use of technology. Information sharing and cooperation, strengthening stakeholder engagement. These are ways that we use. FNID is what I like to call a managed and self-contained entity in that we carry out our own intelligence, our own operation and our own investigations, right? So we have a components of the entity that only treat with operation, right? We get the intelligence and tell them, go for this target. When they pick up the target, you know, uh, they come to the investigation and so on. So these are the areas to achieve focused deterrence is one of the strategies that the JCF is using. What it means is that we are focusing on the people who are contributing significantly to crime, right, rather than focus on crime itself, right? And that has been yielding significant success because, as I told you before, I mean, sometimes we believe that 20% of the people are responsible for 80% of the crime. That is the theory. So therefore, we believe that the theory that has worked for us last year and continue to work is for us to focus on the 20%, right? And, you know, unfortunately for some of them, some of the interaction ends fatally. But in the overwhelming majority of the time, you know, we like to bring our people, our suspect in so that we can test the potency of our cases before the court. So these are the areas that we execute our strategy in. Wrapping up, we're talking about geopolitical. I mean, you know what is happening in the environment. You know, it is not good for business that Jamaica is seen as a major transshipment point. You know, can you imagine being in a conference, whether it is in Italy, where I was in September, or you know, Paris or Belgium, and they say Jamaica. You know, you're a major drug trafficking country, and you know, you are the smallest country in the room. You know, you're the smallest country in the room with barely 3 million people, and countries with, you know, over 10 million people are saying, you know, Jamaica, you're the problem. You know, so you find that it's not good for the social political environment for Jamaica to be deemed a significant contributor to drugs. Our European counterpart in particular, you know, are very concerned about the number of drugs that are coming through Jamaica. And you see some of the stories that are on my slide that, you know, speaks to geopolitical tension. I mean, what is happening now in the Middle East and what is happening closer to us is sometimes causing a lot more activities to come to Jamaica and so on. Our one effort is to curtail those, interdict those. So the task is ours to be more pervasive in our own operations, you know, more intentional, seize more drugs, and you know, we're not about breaking records. I mean, but we're about making a significant dent in drug and drug trafficking and firearm trafficking. We put some cases on the slides as well with convictions that were influenced by FNID and just to show that the act is working and it is having its effect. And of course, that's the end of my presentation. Here are some of my references. So I got the easy part out of the way. So I'm now minded to take some questions. I mean, the reason why I bring colleagues with me is so that they can answer the hard questions. But, you know, so this is a synopsis of what we do. And oftentimes, when we engage with the, I was about to say average Jamaican, and I don't see any average people in the room. You know, but when we engage with non-law enforcement practitioners, you know, they often say, why don't the police do this? You know, why don't the police do that? And everything, 100% of the time, is something that we are doing. But there's no benefit to coming out and say what our strategies are, right? Because it's counterproductive, right? So, you know, what we tell you is what we want you to know. You know, and then sometimes there is value in preserving information. Before I take questions, one of the big challenges we have is when we have big seizures. For example, when we seize the 239 firearms, you know, I was there getting my hands dirty, taking guns out of the concealment, method. I'm not sure I can't say the concealment method, right? Because it's a live matter, right? So, I remember Miss Dobson was there as well. They take out firearm till we're tired, people sleeping on the floor. They eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Processing, taking out 239 firearms. We held it for 1 day, held it for 2 days, and on the 3rd day, the media start calling. I hear that you guys find some guns. So initially, I was denying it because it would have affected our case significantly if it went into the media. But after a while, the media said, this story is too big to hold. And I said, look here. I said to some of the journalists that in the interest of Jamaica, hold the story. When we said we couldn't deny it, these guys were telling us details about our operation. And I know the leak didn't come from FNID, but we have to work with multiple agencies on these seizures. And when I realized that the media knew a lot of the details of the operation and they said they can't hold it because it's a big story, and I've been saying, okay, in the interest of Jamaica, hold it. They said they can't hold it. Breaking news. FNID sees 239 firearms. The government had to hold a press conference and speak about it because this was the most firearms seized in a single incident in the history of Jamaica, right? But what it did to the case is that it alerted the people who should have picked up the package, right? So they don't come for it, right? And it makes our job harder, right? Because it would have been nice if nobody knew about it and we put it back the package, put on back the wrapping paper them and deliver it, to those who intended to come for it, to see who come for it, right? That would have been nice, right? That's how it happens in the movie, right? Yes. So it would have been nice if we were able to do that. But once it gets out there, people know and people hear and people say, "Boy, I think get bust, so we now pick it up," right? My friend, how you do? Good. So so that's one of the challenges that we have. So people come all the media, but why the police them now hold it something secret and make somebody, duh. That's what we're trying to do, But too many variables are at play. But oftentimes, majority of the time, we successfully hold it because we're an entity who are not interested in the publicity of it. We are interested in making arrests, convictions. That's where we get our successes from, right? So when we have seizures, if we can keep that, right, until we are able to advance a successful investigation, operation, and take it to the court. At the point that we have charged people, then we do a press release, right? And people call and say, how in the world that? Right? In the last year, December, we seized 20 odd firearms, and we held that for weeks until we were able to make an arrest. And once we made an arrest, we send a release. This member of that arrested for firearms and that kind of thing. And people call and say, how in the world that? Right? That's what we do. Right? That's what we like. That's the ideal situation. Right? So I just want the people to understand that anything that you can reasonably contemplate that the police should have done, we should be doing, we have been doing this for a very, very, very long time. And we are leveraging the technology. We are using the smart people. Just one more point. I remember when I was joining the force 20 years ago, I had 7 or 8 CXC, something like that. And, one of my uncles learned that I was going to be a police officer. And he said, bright boy like you with almost CXC, I got turn police and all of that kind of thing, and created a big stick out of it. No, if you have 15 CXC, you really can't compete, right? You really can't compete. We have people who are PhD candidates, who are PhD, who are corporals, sergeants, right? We have people with double master's degrees walking downtown on the beats, right? Because we're a qualified force. In terms of attorney at laws, I believe that we have about 30 to 50 attorney at law. We're talking about practicing within our ranks, from sergeant to inspector, go all the way up, even constables, or attorney at laws. So I'm saying to you that we are a qualified force of competent professionals who have made significant progress, and we are by no means we are certainly a force for good, that is increasing our capacity, to articulate what our objectives and our mandates are and engage you beautiful Jamaican people about what we do and how we can do better at what we do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon.
And thank you very much for your presentation. I have two questions. Of the 900 and change rifles seized last year, have any been associated with being missing from any of the local forces?
No. So we have not had, these firearms that we represent on the chart are firearms that are, the overwhelming majority of them are within our custody. The JCF has stringent rules and regulation governing the storing of exhibits, and those procedures are followed. Those firearms that are seized has to be tested by the Forensic Institute, and we have an entire branch, the Forensic Services branch, that is dedicated to ballistic investigation, and of course other elements of forensic investigations that has systems in place to ensure that those weapons and drugs that are seized, are kept in a way that can preserve our integrity. In instances where that happens, the systems, the JCF is an ISO 9001 organization. What it means is that we have satisfied the requirement among an international body that we have systems in place that secures or that guarantees that the significant amount of the time that we engage a service or we engage our SOPs, our processes, and we get it right. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And my
Yes.
next question, of all the 1,201 rifles seized, are they...
Not rifles, firearms.
Firearms seized, are they in functional conditions, meaning that, there are some essential components that if missing, they are not functional? Are they all functional?
I can't say all. I think a small number of those firearms represent imitation firearms that are constructed from, waste material. Some are capable of being fired, some are not. But it's about probably 1% of the number, or less than 1%. A significant, all our firearms that are seized are tested by ballistics. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So my question is basically, we know that there are firearms in Jamaica. However, we know where those firearms are coming from our neighbor up north. We know that it might never stop unless we can stop, unless that problem stops, which it maybe never will. So my question is basically, what can we do in terms of that, in terms of conversations with our neighbors up north, to see how we can stop that inflow of firearms into the country?
The conversation is continuing. Stakeholder engagement is a big part of what we do. We work very closely at FNID with ATF, Homeland Security, and on drugs, our DEA is our international partner, as well as the equivalent agencies in a number of the other countries. We have done significant work in terms of getting the US to send notification or broadcast within international airports on the implications of bringing firearms into Jamaica. We have had cases where our counterparts up north called us to say that we have reason to believe that firearms were shipped to Jamaica under these circumstances, and we make the interdiction and arrest here. And we have, in the past, as recent as last month, contacted our international partners and said we have reason to believe that there are firearms overseas that should be shipped to Jamaica. I personally do not want to run the risk of it leaving your port. Kindly seek if you can interdict it there, and we have had successful interdiction. So we work closely with our international partner. So it's work in progress. We have been able to achieve what we have achieved because of partnership. I mean, is there more to be done? Of course, significant. There's always more to be done. Yes. Here.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Rowe.
Yeah.
Question. Has the FID or FNID seen an increase in assault rifles coming into the country? And so that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, if it is that we have an increase in assault rifles, is there a contemplation to change or to have a different penalty regime for those rifles, given the nature of the damage that those rifles can cause?
Mr. Dobson, I don't know if I can say that we are seeing an increase in assault rifle. I believe that the seizures that we are seeing has been a consistent mix of rifles and handguns. Handguns predominantly make up the number of firearms that we have seized. I mean, rifle is a bit more technical. I mean, rifle oftentimes come disassembled in several parts, and it's often a little bit more challenging. So you find that of a shipment of guns, you will find a 5% or so, and that has been steady of rifles. And therefore, you have a case where you can buy a handgun. What's the name of that handgun that we see a lot? The Taurus, for $150 US. They use, yes, $150 US. They buy that in the United States, and they send a lot of it here and sell it for 300,000 Jamaican dollars. Right? They use legitimate purchases in some time, and sometimes they use what we call straw purchasers. Right? Straw purchasers is like Mr. Fuller, see a cokehead and say, okay, go in this to go buy, who is a citizen that has an ID, buy a firearm for me and carry it come. That's a straw purchaser. That has no linkage or association to Jamaica, but is used to purchase the firearm for the purpose of shipping it to Jamaica. We have significant and fancy terms such as time to crime that allows us to determine the time of purchase versus the time we find it. Right? That is the time to crime. And oftentimes we find that the time to crime is very, very short. A firearm purchase in January, recovered in Jamaica in March, and so on and so forth, means that the firearm has not been prolific. If you had a presentation from our guys at Forensic Services Branch, they will tell you about wanted gun, and they will tell you about this gun. There was a presentation I sat in with Superintendent Bernard from the Forensic Services Branch that was telling us about a gun that they give a particular name. And they tell you that this gun has been involved in 55 scenes since it came to Jamaica, since it came on the scene, right? And it's telling you all the scenes and everywhere that the gun is. Sometimes it's in Westmoreland, sometimes it's in Kingston. And that strengthens the theory or the argument that these guns are sometimes used as loaner guns, right? And there's a one prolific hitman that travel all the way from Kingston to Montego Bay to commit a crime and come back, using paying toll and all of them things, right? Come back into Kingston. So we are able to do all of that and make all that kind of analysis based on ballistics. We are seeing some of our guns, and I say our guns because these guns are prolific guns in Jamaica that are showing up in Cayman Islands, right? And other Caribbean islands, right? Based on ballistic footprints. So it commits a crime in Westmoreland, commits one in Trelawny, commits one in St. Anne, and then the ballistic expert in Cayman picks it up. And so on. So that's how we track our guns. So we have a pretty sophisticated way of knowing the activities of guns and so on. So we're in the gun and drugs business, so we know pretty much about it. Yes.
We heard from you earlier that there's a 95?
95%.
95% conviction rate.
That's right.
There is a perception among Jamaicans that the sponsors of crime, the big man,
yes,
otherwise called, we're not seeing much evidence in the public of those persons being convicted. We always heard of stories of Tom in our community, the little man. So the question is, is your data showing us that these so-called sponsors of crime are within Jamaica or outside of our region and outside of our reach, or is it a misconception that's where the source of it is, and that's why we're not seeing much of that in the media?
Menzi, you can come to this mic. Come to this mic.
All right, good afternoon. So one of the things is sometimes some of these persons who we deem as small-time criminals, they really are not. You understand? And then the linkage between the so-called big men, sometimes it's the evidence. Because if the evidence does not exist, then we cannot arbitrarily arrest and attempt to prosecute persons. One of the things is that these persons that we arrest and charge, sometimes their legal fees are financed by sponsors, right? And as a result of that, they are willing to pay the penalty rather than to give up those persons. So those are the realities that we face.
You know, and I'm sure in recent times, you know, you have seen some headlines with some people who are perceived big men and big women that we have arrested. So as I said before, I mean, those represent some of our favorite arrests, right? So we arrest people from all areas of social stratification, right? You know, that's right. So, you know, I think you can appreciate that people who are who are at a higher social stratification or on the higher income bracket are more able to build systems around them, that it may take a little bit more time to get to them. But when we really get to them, we get to them. And we have statistics to suggest people we have arrested, big major players. And I can tell you from where I sit as director of FNID, we'll be making some big arrests this year. Wow. Yeah. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rowe.
Yes,
My
good
question to you, do we have a way of tracing these firearms that are seized? And also, these firearms, do we also have a way to find out if they were involved in incidents abroad?
Absolutely. So once we seize firearms, they want to hear your voice. They want to know if you can speak. Right? Ms. Dobson.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as it relates to the firearms being traced, we work closely with the ATF. They are responsible for tracing these firearms. So whenever we seize the firearms, we would make a notation of the serial numbers and where it is made, make, model, and serial number, right? We relay that information to members of ATF who have the responsibility of tracing those firearms in the US. Remind me of the latter part of the question.
Well, you answered the question because I asked if we can track to see if they were involved in incidents abroad. So
Yes, of course.
I mean, yes, give her a round of applause. Firearms, you know, the beauty about firearms and the advantage with firearms over drugs is that firearms have a ballistic footprint, you know, except for the 3D ones. And I mean, even for the 3D one, we have developed our own methods to figure out where they are from and where they originate and so on. So that's years of developing a level of efficiency in investigation. But firearms, once they are made, I mean, they are tested and they have a ballistic footprint. So we have firearms that we seize here that we are able to say every crime scene that firearm has been on, right? And so through the ballistic footprint. And that's the beauty, I mean, with firearm and firearm investigation. So we're able to map that and we're able to see how firearm move, I mean, study the potency and all of that. Somebody asked about rifle earlier that I wanted to make the point that, I mean, I will agree that rifles, so a handgun, the effective range of an handgun may be about, 30 to 50 meters, depending on the handgun. A rifle effective range is 100 meters or more. in terms of the distance it's able to travel and still deliver a fatal, still have fatal implications, right? So, I mean, rifles, I mean, yesterday we had a scene where, the first murder in St. Andrews Central Division, that's along Agley Park Road, where a gunman used a rifle to shoot and kill an employee of a popular company on there. But the employee who was killed, not cusping, not making any claims on the case or anything, but I mean the victim, I mean, is somebody that is well known to the police. He appeared on Wanted Wednesdays, and so on. But I mean, this is an investigation where we know the players, and very soon, based on the ballistic footprint, we're able to say where they came from, what they did, how much rounds they dispensed, and that kind of thing. So we are very capable of doing the investigation in terms of the forensic, in terms of the traditional investigation, in terms of scene management, and bring the matters before the court to secure convictions.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Hi.
Rowe. My question to you, with the repeated customers, do you
Yes.
believe that we need more stringent measures to for deterrence, or you have any recommendation?
I mean,
Or
yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I have a lot of recommendation. Do you have time? But I mean, in terms of recommendation, I think one of the big stories out of since the start of the year was that FNID had a big operation at a courier service. I mean, when I went to FNID, in May of last year, one of the first meeting I had was with Mr. Menzi. And one of the things he said to me is that courier service is a problem, because what you find is that, people packaging an envelope or whether it is in coffee or car parts or whatever they're shipping as legitimate goods, they package sometime up to 2 kilograms of cocaine, drop it off at a courier service or through a regular post office, and then it makes its way either around the country or overseas. When we make an arrest, oftentimes we have challenges because identity information is false, right? And then sometimes some of these courier service do not cooperate in terms of providing the necessary support to us to carry out our investigation. So what you find is that if the address is legitimate, our office is at 230 Spanish Town Road. Somebody can go to a shipping company and say that their address is 230 Spanish Town Road and their name is John Brown, right? And they show a fake ID and they ship a package, and then when we start the investigation, find the traffic, 230 Spanish Town Road happened to be our office where the person lives, right? And then the name does not exist anywhere, so it makes it very difficult. So it becomes a long-run shortcut situation where it takes a little bit more time to solve courier services. So one of the things that we have been calling for is for amendment in our legislation to ensure that people who use courier services, especially our postal services, to carry out an offense, such as trafficking of drugs, then the sanctions are greater. And I believe that sanctions act as deterrent. And I believe that should be looked at. We believe that the barrier to ship is very low. We need shippers, courier services need to have systems in place where they're able to verify identification and verify addresses, right? And this is the bare minimum that we believe, and this can put a dent. We believe that the punitive sanctions around possession, around trafficking is too low, 500,000, 600,000, suspended sentence, 6 months before, 6 months in prison, 6 months at hard labor. I mean, for cocaine, for large quantities of ganja, this is not deterrent. This is vacation for the guys, and they come back with new ideas and continue to perpetuate the same activities. So if we are really serious about, and probably if the media was here, this would be a controversial statement, that if we're really serious about drug trafficking and so on, this is on YouTube, we would really look at strengthening our legislation. And of course, there's always a need for more resources, to strengthen our fight as the persons who are at the forefront of this fight against drugs. And of course, we want to say to the Jamaican people, as we always do, I mean, the sensitivities around, or the sympathies around ganja, I mean, is misplaced. Right, the sympathies around ganja is misplaced. Oftentimes, I mean, I like to read the social media comments because the thing with the Jamaican public, you can read the comments before you actually read them, because once you see the story, you know exactly what they're gonna say, right? And the same thing, I imagine that they would say is the same thing that they say. I mean, leave the man within weed, man. You know, police are fight against the rest of them, that kind of thing. You know, load the weed and that kind of thing. And they don't understand that, especially when ganja or weed or marijuana is being used as currency, it makes the situation even more dangerous, right? So I cannot end the evening without telling you to tell us what you know. And of course, if there's anything that you believe can assist in our effort, I believe that the success is not FNID success, it is our success. And you know, to tie it in with, I'm sure by now you are convinced that we cannot achieve sustainable development without supporting the efforts of the police, right? It is my hope, it is my desire, one, that you all will be successful at the end of this journey. And two, that we will benefit from your efforts when you become practitioners out there in our courts, in our prosecution's office, or within wherever you decide to exercise the knowledge that you have gained here. I know that it's not an easy journey, and that's why I've not attended upon it. But you know, I wish you all well. I am extremely proud of all of you, especially those who I've had acquaintances with for many years. Some people are in this room who I did LLB with. You know, I'm really proud of your journey, and I look forward to working with you when you leave here, whether it is in our courts, whether it is in my office, and so on. But be noble members of the profession, be honest, you know, be minded of the source of funds to ensure that the proceeds that engage your services is not proceeds that we have interest in, right? It's better to refuse a case than to take one that is clouded in mystery. You may not be able to turn back from that. I mean, from an honest entity to honest people. I mean, we look forward to your contribution. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Seminar Group K and the Norman Manley Law School Legal Aid Clinic, it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks for this very memorable event. A big thank you to our esteemed guest speaker, Mr. Rowe, and his team for sharing his time and invaluable insights on illegal firearms and how they can impact Jamaica's social development. We are particularly grateful for your perspective on the link between the drug trade and the firearm influx in our country, and also the reminder that we all needed that it takes a village to combat this issue, and we all have a part to play to ensure the sustainable development of our country. Your expertise has given us a clearer and more grounded outlook, as oftentimes we highlight the bad and we forget the good and we can lose hope. So we appreciate this presentation, which inspired us and made us believe that achieving our goal in sustainable development is very much possible. I would also like to extend my warmest gratitude to all our attendees, as well as Mr. Rowe's team, who have aided with making this possible. And I want you all to join me in giving them another round of applause. And I will kindly ask Mr. Rowe's team to join us as we call our colleague, Ms. Graham, to make a presentation on our behalf. Thank you.
Mr. Rowe, on behalf of Group K, Norman Manley Law School graduates of 2026, we would like to thank you for taking the time to come and share your wealth of knowledge with us. And we look forward to coming into your office, as you said, some of us in prosecution and some in defense, not as customers. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. On behalf of Group K, Seminar Group, graduates of 2026, we want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and want to thank you for gracing us with your presence. The only female in the group. Mr. Rose said she's the ballistic expert. Firearm investigator. We thank you because we know your work is very tedious, especially because guns have been used so much things in Jamaica. And so we look forward to the work that you continue to do, and we look forward to joining you in your profession at some point. So the most important lady here. So, thank you for keeping him. Thank you for keeping his schedules and for making him turn up here today. Thank you so much, because we know Mr. Ronan very
All right. We want to thank you. And I also want to remind you that the JCF is always looking to recruit the finest.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Mr. Rowe, your team and personnel, for a very lively and inspiring, insightful discussion, and also for encouraging and charging the future persons in the profession. That concludes our presentations for this afternoon, for this evening, and we will return tomorrow, Thursday, March 5, where we'll be having our in-person legal aid fair. And for those of you who are here, who are online, and for those who will be coming, we look forward to receiving you so that you can see the exhibits that we will have in the parking lot, various products, services, information you might find useful. We are located at 18 Gibraltar Hall Road on the UA Mona campus, which is behind the campus police station. So we look forward to receiving you then. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of evening.